Welcome to today's webinar, Help Improve Student Writing While Saving Time in Google Docs, brought to you by Simple K-12. My name is Lori and I am here with Jason Carroll, and we are so excited to have all of you here with us today. Now, this webinar is brought to you free today thanks to our sponsor, Text Help, the makers of WriQ, a free writing assessment extension for Google Docs. Now, Text Help creates smart, user-friendly literacy and learning solutions that provide the support each student needs through reading, writing, math, and research. Now, just a little bit about our presenter. Jason Carroll is the Global Products Manager at Text Help, where he provides training for educators on the effective use of educational technology. He holds an MBA as a graduate of the Assistive Technology Application Certificate Program from California State University at Northridge. He's a Google educator and an authorized Google education trainer. Jason, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me. Happy Saturday.
I will go ahead and pass the screen to you, so you should see that pop up come up on your screen.
Okay, should be all set there.
All right, Jason, looks great. We are good to go.
All right, thank you so much. Just going in presentation view here. Right, so yeah, happy Saturday. Thanks so much for having me. I've got, I know I don't have too much time with you here. I've got about 30 minutes to go through a few things. A little bit of background on, go through a little bit of background on writing in general and some of the stats and why we probably haven't seen as much progress as we should, and then get into some cool technology, some googly technology that can help. So I should start by saying we've got these little guys we call text helpers, and we put them in our presentations and things like that. And today is May the 4th, and for those of you that aren't familiar, that's Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. So our clever marketing department has given me a little slide here that shows our little text helper guys turning into Star Wars characters. So I thought that was clever. Should bring that up. It is also just kind of a very busy weekend. I live in Kentucky, and today is Derby Day as well. It is going to start pouring rain in a little while, so that means the field will be wide open, and it could be anyone's race. So the fastest 2 minutes in sports will be going on later today. And if that's not enough, if you're joining us from, say, maybe Australia or somewhere, it's already tomorrow. And that means it's Cinco de Mayo. So I found the clever hat to put on, but also don't forget the margarita as well. So a very crazy, busy weekend. If you're here with us, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to hang out with us. So having said all that, if you want to get a copy of today's slides, I didn't include the margarita slide, but if you want a copy of the slides that I'll be going through today with some stats and things like that on it, you can get it here. I've got a short URL. I imagine an email is going to be going out to everyone after this as well. So if you don't get it now, no big deal. This is just if you want to follow along. It is case sensitive. That is text.help/K 12 all together there, and that'll let you make a copy of the presentation, so you'll have access to it as well. So moving on, some stats to start off our conversation today. If you look at writing specifically in the U.S., anyways, we've got this thing called the Nations Report Card, and every couple of years they just go and do a general measurement across a nationwide, and you can get it broken down by state as well, but really they're all pretty similar, and we look at reading and math and writing and a lot of other areas. And the picture's not good, and it hasn't really been good ever since they've been doing this. I'm pretty sure they've been tracking it for well over 20 years, and every time you look at it, there's very little gain, sometimes no gain at all, sometimes the opposite, that occurs. And this has been going on for many years, despite all the different things that we've been trying to do to make it better. So from specifically those stats, if you look at grades 8 and 12 students, only a quarter of those students are what would be considered proficient in writing. And, you know, I know writing can be different these days for a lot of students when you think social media and that sort of stuff, but it is a critical skill. I can't think of a day that goes by in my position that I'm not required to do some type of writing. So this is a concern. And in addition, this probably isn't surprising, but, you know, a third of those who score low in writing say that they don't enjoy it. It's not one of their favorite activities. They don't enjoy writing. And that is also a shame, because there's so much enjoyment that can come out of that, writing stories and those sort of things. So then the question is, okay, so we've known this. It's been this way for a long time. Why has it not got better? There are a few reasons for that as well. One is that the act of assessing writing is very difficult. So it's difficult to know if students are truly making progress in writing or not, because assessing writing is very subjective. let's imagine that there are 100 teachers in a classroom, in a room, and I have a personal narrative written by a student. Well, if I hand that personal narrative writing to 100 educators, I could very possibly get back 100 different scores. And that's because assessing writing is it's subjective. It's what one person may think is good, another may not like, and those sort of things. So it makes it difficult to get a true picture of how well students are writing. So I think that is one thing that we need to consider whenever we're looking for ways to move forward. And then there's also very little training available for teachers. So there have been some studies done on this, and it's interesting, I think. There's one study that it looked at the syllabuses from, it'd be syllabi, I guess, from 2,400 teacher prep programs. And after looking at those 2,400 teacher prep programs, they saw little to no evidence of any writing instruction that happens. There's a separate study where they looked at where they spoke with over 500 teachers in grades 3 through 8, and it showed that less than half of those teachers had taken a college class that devoted any time to teaching writing, and then less than a third of those actually had a class where it was about teaching students to write. So when you add all this up, it being very subjective, there's not much training. Now there are summer programs and things like that, kind of postgraduate, that you can always get into, but it does show why we have some of the issues that we have with not seeing student progress. So now that everybody's depressed because of all the low, like the scores and where we've been heading and things like that, there are some positive things, and one of those is technology. And yes, I work for an educational software company. Before I worked for an educational software company, I was an instructional and an assistive technology consultant. So my entire professional career has always been around finding technology that can help students, especially those students that have diverse learning needs. And so here's an example. This is a student. This was an example that a teacher had sent me. And this is a student's writing. And after giving this student access to some technology supports that could help, 2 days later, same student, and a world of difference. I mean, there's proper indentions, everything's spelled correctly. He's using quotation marks. He's actually even quite the artist. He added on there at the end. So all this happened in a couple of days just by giving a student access to some tools that can help. Now, so what kind of tools? There are loads of different technologies and software programs that can help with writing. Specifically in this example, I'm talking about things like text-to-speech. So a student would write something and then use text-to-speech to listen to it read back. Dictation, sometimes the act of writing and getting things out of your head and on paper is very difficult for students. So just using built-in or some other kind of tool to where you can speak and it will type for you can help, because things are spelled correctly and all that sort of stuff. Word prediction. At Text Help, we have a toolbar we've had it's called Read and Write, and we've this has been around for a while. The most recent version is a Chrome extension that's quite popular. I think there's about 19 million users at the moment. But it includes word prediction when you're typing in like Google Docs, for example. We all use word prediction every day whenever we're sending a text message, and we don't think anything about it, but it improves our spelling and ability to write and all those sort of things. But whenever we get into a word processing program, we don't use those tools. So I find that interesting. We know that students that use word prediction that are struggling writers, we know that they write about twice as much and they use more mature vocabulary and they don't make any spelling errors. So interesting to see that it's not used more. But like dictionaries, and there's editing tools, there's organization tools like graphic organizers. These are the types of tools I'm talking about that previous student that I mentioned had access to, along with some training on how to appropriately use it, to totally change things in a very short amount of time. And so I just think that's, I like to spend time talking about that because I think it's amazing the difference that technology can make for students. So the purpose of then what we're talking about today, and I'm not going to take up much of your time because I don't have that much, but I just want to talk about assessing writing. So I've showed you that there are tools, or I've explained anyways, that there are tools that can help students write, but that doesn't really change the thing about after they finish writing and then they turn that in or share it back with you if you're in Google Docs. How do you assess that? And so there's an interesting thing that I think has happened. And if you go back, I just chose a random date just to kind of get the point across. But let's say you go back to 100 or 1000 BC, right? And what was probably happening was people were carving things on clay tablets, assuming writing had been established by then. and then eventually they migrated from clay tablets and with stones and such to a scroll. And after a scroll, they got kind of a binded book kind of paper and notebook kind of thing, and that was a little bit of progress there. After that, we got to the typewriter, and that made it nice and legible. I don't know that it really changed much, but it was still it was nice and legible as far as that goes. Then we moved to a computer, which changed everything. But what I see often is students using a computer to type their work, and then they print it out and hand it in, and then the educator would grade it just like we've always been grading things in the past. And if that's the case, like, not much has changed since literally the Stone Age, using tablets and such. So with technology we have today, there are better and easier and more efficient ways to save time, because assessing student writing is a very time-consuming process. If you're an English teacher, you're going to be aware of this. If you have 30 kids in your class and you have 4 classes of 30, and it's time to write essays, and now you've got to grade 120 essays. It's just not fast. And you also know that if you're looking at a stack of 30 papers or 100 papers, it is very difficult to give the same amount of effort on paper 100 as it is to paper number 1. And so that's always a concern as well. So we all know what the problems are. Let's talk about what we can do as a solution. For a solution, that is where RIQ comes in. So RIQ is it used to be an add-on for, and some of you may have it still as the add-on, that's fine. We're just migrating over to an extension. But RIQ is now an extension for Chrome that you would use in Docs to help quickly and effectively and efficiently assess student writing in Google Docs. So the idea behind RIQ is that there are several metrics that are pretty much universally agreed on that are a good indicator of how students are writing. So let's take, for example, the amount of errors, right? The amount of errors that a student's making. Pretty much universally agreed on that if you break the errors down, you have grammar errors and punctuation errors and spelling errors. Less errors is better. It's useful to track the type of errors that are being made so that you can go back and give guided feedback to students. But everybody pretty much agrees that the number and types of errors is an important thing to track, and less errors is better. Very similar, there's something called correct word sequences. This is used a lot in studies and such, like in a university setting, if they're going to do a study to see if students are writing better. Correct word sequences is an interesting measure. The way that works is, imagine you have 2 words next to each other. That's a sequence. If one of those words contains an error that breaks that sequence, it makes it an incorrect word sequence. So again, generally speaking, the more correct word sequences, the better. And if you look at a student over time and they're writing more, so they're getting more word sequences, the more correct sequences they get would generally show that that student's improving their writing. Other interesting things, there are vocabulary maturity. So at Text Help, we've been in the literacy field for over 20 years. We have our own metric for calculating the maturity of individual words. Again, generally speaking, as a student gets older, they're going to use more complex vocabulary, so it is an interesting thing to track, and depending on the assignment, you'd be able to see if they're using more mature vocabulary versus less, and over time, you'd like to see their vocabulary maturity increase. So all these things are pretty much universally agreed on that, yeah, these are good things to track. So how do you get all these in one place that when a student is writing, you can then track these over time? And that's where RIQ comes in, right? So RIQ right now, if you were to go to the Chrome Web Store, you can get it. I've got a link in this slide deck at the end that I'll show you as well. That will take you right to the page and tell you all about it and how to get it. But at the moment, it is a completely free tool for educators. Notice I said at the moment, eventually there will be some premium things that will be added, but what you have now and everything that I'm showing you that you're going to be able to do is free and will stay free forever. So it is a free tool for educators to help assess student docs. It also allows you to score student writing directly in Google Docs. So I'm aware that there are some other programs out there through publishing companies and things that you can sign into a website, have a very specific prompt, paste, or have a student log in and write a response to that prompt, and it can do some auto grading. And that's nice, but there's also a lot of steps involved in that, and it's useful for, the 1 or 2 times a year for that very specific prompt. To where what RIQ will do is give you the metrics that I just talked about directly in a doc for any writing that you would like to assess. There's no additional logins or complex onboarding stuff, as I mentioned, because you're just signed into Google. Automatically scores several writing indicators that I mentioned. It also includes rubrics because a student can have a very well-written paper that has no errors and a high vocabulary maturity, and they're spent a lot of time on task and all these sort of things, but maybe they didn't answer the right question. So it can be written really well, but it may still not be that good of a writing because it was answering a question that wasn't even asked, right? So there are rubrics that cover like the whole thing about how it started and the closing and all the other normal kind of things you would look at whenever you're assessing on the quality side of a writing. So all those are built directly into RIQ that you can access. And then, of course, this allows you to look at one writing to the next to see if students are actually making progress, which is something that we've had a hard time as in general have a hard time doing in the past, is tracking actual progress to see if students are making progress. So let's take a look at how RIQ works. And the way it would, the general way it works is you'll install RIQ, and it'll be a Chrome extension, and you'll see the little icon in your browser just like any other extension. If you're not familiar with how extensions work, you'll click on it, and you'll have a little tab over on the side of your screen. So I have asked my daughter to write a story for me, or to type a story for me that I could use as an example. She said she's okay with that. She's in grade 6 right now. But she told me to make sure I informed everyone that the errors that are in here, I added them in later, just for the purpose of showing how RIQ would work. She wanted everyone to be clear that she didn't make these errors. So, so there's that kind of disclosure thing there. So she'll be happy with me. So the way RIQ works is you'll turn on RIQ, you'll get the tab over at the right. If you toggle it on, you'll click there's a little toggle switch there. If you turn it on, what it does is you can see there are some errors here that it picks up that even Google's own spell and grammar check and stuff like that did not get. And it highlights it. It could be a spelling error, it could be a grammar error, it could be a punctuation error, and we color code those. But you can click on any of these errors. So for example, if I click because that's underlined, it gives me this kind of drop down. And it's not telling me what the replacement is because, you know, that would be maybe something for a student version. But on this version, this is for the teachers. It's telling me, okay, well, that's a spelling error. And it gives me the ability to change it. If it's not a spelling error, if it's actually a grammar or a punctuation error, I can change that. Or it may be the case it's not an error at all. Maybe it's something that RIQ somehow picked as an error, but it's actually it's actually maybe a proper noun or something like that. And you could just clear that, and that would clear. And very similar, if RIQ happens to miss an error, you could go through at any time and click on a word, and you could mark it as a spelling, grammar, or punctuation error. So as you do that, all those metrics I mentioned before will update. RIQ is based, well, originally when the kind of grammar and spelling check behind it had about 8,000 grammar rules for U.S. English, which is a really large number. Turns out the English language is quite complicated. Since that time, we've added another 1,500 rules, believe it or not. So it is quite good at picking up and finding the various errors that are there. And whenever we miss that, it's usually pretty quick that we make improvements on that if necessary. But I think you'll find it does a good job. So you get that, you make sure all the errors are marked as needed, and then you'll see there's like the little arrow here that you can click, and that will actually pull RIQ out. It's going to say, here it says Chloe Carroll, so that is my daughter. And she, so that says her name at the top. She's in grade 6. This is a narrative writing. It will know that it's grade 6 because when you first use RIQ, it asks, you know, what grades do you teach and those sort of things. It'll know the student because they'll be logged in. You can always change the grade if needed, and then you just choose the type of writing that it is. And then you see it's got the spelling errors, the number of grammar errors, punctuation. It's got the word count. It's got the vocabulary age. So the vocabulary age is important. I don't want people to misunderstand it. I said like vocabulary maturity and those sort of things. It is in years, so it's not 8th grade, it's 8 years. And it is very common that, let's say you have a high school student writing, that the vocabulary age may be lower. Maybe it's age 10 or 12, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It depends on the purpose of the writing. Like the New York Times, for example, is written at about age 14. If you think about what age Americans generally read on, and you just need to think who your audience is and who you're writing for. And it's very often that if you want to write, say, a blog article or something like that that's going to be out there for the world to see, you wouldn't want that to be written at a very high vocabulary maturity age because a lot of people wouldn't be able to comprehend it. So a lower age isn't necessarily bad, but you do want to keep kind of track of that to see how the students are progressing and to make sure that matches up with the purpose of the assignment. And we also track time on task, which is interesting. The way that works is it's just because RIQ is installed and you have Google revision history, and it'll basically tell you every minute if there is activity, it will uptick by 1. So that'll tell you if a student was actually, how much time they spent working on this assignment. If they start writing, and that'll count it as a minute, but then they stop and they leave for 10 minutes and grab a cup of coffee and come back. Those 10 minutes when the tab is open but nothing's happening, that's not being counted as time on task. So it's an interesting measure to keep a look at. Can also tell you if they copied and pasted it, because if it says time on task, it was 1 minute and you have like 4 pages written, probably something happened there. So those are just the things that are embedded. Moving on, when you hit next, after you make sure all the spelling and grammar is the way you want it, you can click next. Here you see that it has the rubrics built in. So there is a rubric specific to each grade and genre. And then you'll see here it's got like focus and setting and organization and plot and those sort of things. So under focus and setting, basically the student could be below grade level, approaching grade level, at grade level, or above grade level. And if you click the little plus icon, it will expand, and that will tell you what grade level is, so that you can choose the appropriate one. If you don't want to use this rubric, if you have your own rubrics, eventually we'll add the ability for you to add custom rubrics. But for now, we just have the built-in rubrics. But if you don't want to use these rubrics, you have your own, that's fine. You can click skip rubric, and that'll just take you to the next page or the next tab over, which is the summary. So this basically says, here's your RIQ score. More on that in a moment. Here's your rubric score. It is out of 100. The RIQ score is a bit more complex because it encompasses a lot of things. So there's a little question mark you can click on to learn more about it. You can enter in feedback. Here's all the summary of everything. And then if you'd like, when you're finished, you can hit save, and that'll save that so that next time you come in, you'll just see the score. But you can also choose to insert it if you would like. And what that would do is it just inserts an image at the top of the page with all this feedback and summary and all that kind of stuff there, so the next time the student comes in, they would see that. RIQ is quite smart as well. Let's say you do this and save it, and then a student goes in 2 days later and updates it. Maybe they're on their second draft now, or their final copy. When you get back in, RIQ will notify you. The little check mark here will change, and you'll be notified that the document has changed. So you can then rescore it if you would like to. So you'll be notified if that happens, and you can rescore it. And later you'll be able to track kind of the different versions and stuff like that and see progress over time if you would like. So that's basically how it works. I want to spend just a minute telling you about the RIQ score, and then we'll be towards the end so I can take some questions if there are any. On the RIQ score, so it's interesting. We've had tens of thousands of documents scored through RIQ, and it's given us information that probably hasn't been previously available before. If you ask a teacher, is that student writing on grade level, that's sometimes a complicated question to answer, because then it comes to, well, what's grade level? If you're familiar with reading, there are like Lexile scores, and they can be anywhere between 15 and 1500, and that kind of tells you the complexity of the document that's being read. The RIQ score is kind of similar for writing, and so we actually have a set of norms that we can tell you based on percentile and grade exactly what a RIQ should be for students. So you'll be seeing more of that roll out. But what it consists of is 4 basic things. One is productivity, and the productivity is how much the student wrote. Generally speaking, the more that they write for their age, then that would positively impact a RIQ score. Accuracy has to do with the spelling and grammar and punctuation, all those kind of things. Again, generally speaking, the more accurate you are, the higher a RIQ score would be. And then the pace is more of that time on task kind of stuff, like how much time you spent writing. And then the maturity is the vocabulary maturity that we also spoke about. So you take all these things in, do some math, and you would generally end up with a score, assuming the student didn't copy or paste in, you'll generally end up with a score between 3 or 300. And then depending on their age, we can tell you if that's if that's age appropriate, and if they're on grade level or below grade level or above grade level. So that's what goes into the RIQ score. There's a lot in there to make one number. Unfortunately, we couldn't make it in between 0 and 100. So we've just had to add the little question mark, and we'll add additional details in there to help understand what that means. But that's the RIQ score. And so just to tell you where this is going, because I know I'm out of time, but I want everyone here to know everything I've showed you in RIQ is completely free. So you should download it and use it, and you'll have my email here at the end. If you run into problems or have questions, just email me, and always happy to get feedback on this sort of stuff. What we're working on is a better way. So we've got a blog post that explains their IQ score and all that, but we want to have like a nice fuel gauge looking thing to where you'll immediately know with their IQ score if that student is on target or behind or ahead of things. An educator dashboard is on the way too, so that you don't just have to keep going back to the doc to see everything. You can just go to the dashboard and see all the history, and I'll show you some screenshots of what that'll look like soon. We'll also add those national norms in. So immediately once you have a student and you have their IQ score and all these other scores, you can see how that compares. If it's a grade 6 student, you can see how that compares with other grade 6 students throughout the U.S. Interestingly enough, you'll also be able to do this at the district level as well, because you'll be able to, once you start using RIQ, you'll be able to set your own norms and benchmarks and things like that, and actually see progress in your own school or district. So that could be interesting. You'll also be able to add custom rubrics. That's coming. And then we're also going to do a student version. This is all really based around teachers now, so you can see how students are doing and track progress. But we want a student version there as well. And that's going to be more about making students better writers. The best way I know how to explain it is kind of like a Fitbit for writing. I wear a Fitbit, and it nudges me to make positive decisions. So if I've been sitting for a while, it kind of vibrates and it tells me I should take some steps and things like that. Sends me a summary of how I've done through the week and if it's better or worse than the last week. And we want to do something like that for students to encourage them to write more and become better writers. So that's the future. To give you an idea what that looks like, these are just some mock-ups of kind of what we'll be doing. Imagine going to your dashboard. You've been using RIQ for a while in different classes. You've got a class view here with some kind of stats, and you click on an individual class. That takes you to your class view, and you'll be able to see the RIQ score for the class and kind of the productivity, everything that's going on in your classroom. Then you'll be able to click on an individual student, and when you click on an individual student, you'll be able to see their average IQ score and the types of errors they're making. You'll be able to compare that with national norms. You'll be able to see a history of every document that they ever wrote, and even every version of every document. So if they've done a first draft and second draft and so on, all this will be nice and tidy in a dashboard that you can access. It'll give you nice, useful reporting information and progress tracking, monitoring, and that sort of thing. So that's where we are heading with RIQ. I feel like I've spoken like a million miles a second here, trying to get through this. But Lori, I don't know, are there any questions that have popped up? I know we're running close on the end of time here.
Great. Jason, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I'll go ahead and pull the screen back here. Just give you a couple of moments to catch your breath, and then we'll take some Q&A from our attendees. So if you do have a question for Jason, please feel free to submit it now through that questions box of GoToWebinar. This webinar has been brought to you free today thanks to our sponsor, TextHelp, the makers of RIQ, a free writing assessment extension for Google Docs. TextHelp creates smart, user-friendly literacy and learning solutions that provide the support each student needs through reading, writing, math, and research. All right, Jason, did have a few questions coming in here, so I'll go ahead and get your contact information up from my end. First question came in from Maria. She says, RIQ is a very useful tool. Can we access it directly in Google Docs in every computer, or do we need... Whoops, my screen is scrolling here. Do we need any special device to do it?
No, so all you need is the Chrome web browser, and you install it it's a Chrome extension. So as long as you're signed in to Chrome on any device, it'll just be there for you. So you'll be able to use it on Chromebooks or Macs or PCs. All you need is the Chrome browser, and then you can sign into the Chrome browser and install it, and it'll just be wherever you go on any device.
Okay, super. Next question came in from Ken asking, how are the rubrics established? Can I add my district's rubrics?
Right. So the current rubrics that are established are kind of based on, it's not really Common Core, but basically a common set of kind of national kind of writing guidelines that we worked with a researcher at the University of Central Florida to create. And we have one for each grade level and genre. So those are there. At the moment, you cannot add your own rubrics, but that is something that we are going to, that's going to be a feature that will come out in the not too distant future. We're hoping around the time school starts back, you'll be able to add your own custom or district rubrics as well.
Okay, perfect. Joan is asking, do you have accommodations for special needs students, such as writing checklists and then graphic organizers?
So not with RIQ specifically. Now I mentioned earlier on some of the things we have a tool called Read and Write, and Read and Write would generally contain a lot of the writing accommodations that students would need. So if they, if like word prediction, speech input, those are common accommodations that a student would probably have listed on IEP that they may use for testing. And so Read and Write would be the tool that would provide those. And at the moment, RIQ is just a way for, let's say they use that, then it would be a way for that RIQ would be a way that you could assess their progress after using those tools.
Okay, perfect. Now, what is the earliest grade that a teacher could utilize RIQ?
Well, so we have it there for grades. We don't have norms for grade 1, but we do have rubrics. So you could do grades 1 through 12. It's mainly a K-12 thing, although I understand, grade 1, you're not really doing large amounts of writing. But we do have rubrics, and you could use it with them for sure for that. Okay,
awesome. Christine is asking, do students have to log into RIQ to capture the stats?
Nope. It's if they do not, they just log in. They just go and write in Google Docs, and then when they share that or turn it in through Classroom or however it is they do that, whenever you have access to the doc, you're the one with RIQ installed, and it will just pull out of that because you have access to the document as well. It'll just pull those stats and metrics and give you your error count and all those things from that doc. The student will not have to install or sign into anything. We will have a student version eventually, but they still wouldn't have to sign into it. It would just, if the extension's installed, there's no additional signing in required.
Okay, great. Jason, Andrea is asking, do my students need this add-on as well to view their grade?
They do not. The way it works right now is after you as a teacher go through and assess it, when you get to the summary screen, there's an insert button, and that just inserts kind of an image with a summary at the top of their document, and they would view it there. Whenever we release the student version, they would be able to just open the extension themselves and see the feedback there, so you wouldn't have to insert an image into their paper. But right now, there's not even a student version. They definitely don't need to install it. You would just insert that summary at their doc, and then they would be able to see their score from it.
All right, Jason, awesome. Did have a comment coming in that I wanted to share with you, and thank you, Maria, for sharing this. She said, thank you for answering my question. I think I'll start using RIQ and tell all my colleagues that is a really good tool.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's great. And if you have any questions or want to see where things are going, you find me on Twitter, or and I think my email address is in the slide deck if you have a copy as well. So just reach out and let me know. That's great.
Okay, great. Michelle is asking, will this tool be available in Spanish as well? I teach high school Spanish and would love to be able to use it there as well.
That's a good question. We are considering localizing it. The problem is, remember I said the English language, and we have like 8,000 grammar rules, and we've added another 1,500 grammar rules. The service that we'd be using for Spanish is just not nearly as good, I don't think. So we may, like Read and Write, we've fully localized it into Spanish, and we just need to research and see how good it is when we have a Spanish version. If you want to reach out to me separately, if that's something you're interested in, I would be interested in your feedback on what we're doing there.
Okay, great, Jason.